Good evening to Christchurch West. Oh, that sounds good. That sounds good. That sounds good. Well, first, let me say thanks for having me here. Exciting times in the country and in the history of the Barbados Labour Party. A good time to count yourself, to count ourselves among the Barbados Labour Party family, right? 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 Yeah, I think so. And I feel quite proud. I've been listening to your secretary read the minutes and talk about all of your activities in Christchurch West. Christchurch West is an important constituency, especially now. Right? The constituencies of Christchurch have to rally and make your presence felt because it seems that some of those in some parts of Christchurch do not consider themselves or have not considered their representation, or let me put it this way. Regrettably, the representation in some parts of Christchurch, one part of Christchurch in particular, has left something to be desired. And while I did come to talk a little bit about government policy and talk a little bit about what we are working with Barbadians to help achieve, I also have to be very clear that it bothers me when there are attempts at deception. It bothers me when people try to perpetrate deceit on the good people of the Labour Party, on the good people of Christchurch, and on the good people of Barbados. And I come with this particular perspective, perhaps a perspective that some of my colleagues that were previously on the front bench for the last 2 years may not have. Because there's this notion that the only way you can have a voice, or the only way you can represent people, is by crossing the floor to take up high office on the other side. And I want to make some things very clear this evening. When I chose to occupy the backbench for 2 years, it was not with the intent of any particular area of advocacy. I consider that as a Barbados Labour Party member of Parliament, as a member of Parliament for the party that constitutes the government, I have a responsibility. I considered that I had that responsibility in advocacy with my colleagues, in parliamentary group meetings on Mondays. I had a responsibility to attend. And it seems that those who have chosen to cross the floor to take up high office on the other side did not understand that they had an avenue, that they had a duty to occupy and to take up to represent the people of Christchurch South. They would have you believe that the only way you can speak on behalf of people is if you are getting one of the highest salaries in Parliament so to do. And I want to disabuse us of that notion, and I use myself as an example for that. Your honourable member of Parliament, he's a very honourable man, so he may not wish to tell you about the number of parliamentary group meetings that the now leader of the opposition missed completely. He may not wish to tell you that. I won't ask him to tell you that. The parliamentary group meeting of the Barbados Labour Party is where we define and discuss policy. It is all our responsibility, not just those who occupy the executive and sit on the front bench. And your honourable member of Parliament may also not wish to tell you about all the quarrelling that I used to do in there. I used to quarrel. That is my responsibility to represent the people of St. Michael South Central. That is the avenue that the Barbados Labour Party afforded me as a member of the backbench. That was my duty. So the notion that you didn't have a voice or you couldn't speak up on behalf of people of Christchurch South is a fallacy. And I want us to be clear on that. The way that you represent your constituents is to show up in the constituency, is to walk about and talk to people, is to listen to people's concerns, is to show up at Parliament when the Tuesday come, take off your sunglasses, stay awake, and engage in the business of the people of Barbados. You did not need to assume the position of leader of the opposition in order to do that. That was a choice that you made, and let us be real. Straight talk. If you wanted to be ushered in by protocol and sit down in a fancy seat at the people events, say so. Say that. Be honest. We're not going to judge you for that. But do not claim that you couldn't represent the people of Christchurch South in Parliament because you didn't have the opportunity. You know, I take very seriously, always have and always will, my duty to the people of St. Michael's South Central. And one of the things that I find extremely encouraging about this great party of ours is that all ideas can contend. There is space for dissent. And even though sometimes my friend, Minister Duguid, didn't always like all the robustness of my dissent, there is space for it. That is what makes this Barbados Labour Party different from the other people. There's space for us to discuss, to disagree, and to come to an understanding about the way that we go forward. And I'll give you some examples that I happen to be very proud of. We had a position called school monitors. We had school monitors working in our schools, and it was always intended, it's something that came up during COVID, it was intended to be a temporary position. Many of us realize the tremendous contribution that school monitors were making and are making in our schools. And one of the things that I advocated for was for us to be able to make that position a permanent one, to be able to transition it to the aides that they now have in schools. And I'll tell you the truth. People came from far and wide to that little office in Tweedside Road to discuss with me how important they felt the role was. You see, not everything that you say and do for advocacy has to be in front of a television camera, has to be in the newspaper. I had discussions with the Minister of Education. I had discussions with the Prime Minister. The discussions highlighted the fact that these school monitors were mostly women providing care at these institutions. And if we had a period during the summer vacation where they were not remunerated, it would affect the extent to which they could prepare to get their children back to school. The Minister of Education agreed. The Prime Minister agreed. And from there, we were able to find a way clear to bring these school monitors on in a permanent way. And today, most of them are working in schools across Barbados. That is how you sit on a backbench and advocate for the people in your constituency and the people in Barbados. Now, if many of you have been paying attention, you would also know that I quarrel about tenantry land. I say quarrel in the way, in the colloquialism, right? That is just a turn of phrase. But I made very strong representation about the issue of tenantry land. The fact that there are many people in St. Michael South Central and other areas in St. Michael, who had been waiting to be able to take possession of that land. The issue of land tenure and ownership is very, very important in Barbados. And it is important to the legacy of the Barbados Labour Party. It is our legacy. The Tenantries Freehold Purchase Act is our legacy. And I want people to understand that it is not a historical fact. It is part and parcel and the core of the ideology of what makes us the Barbados Labour Party. Ownership matters. We had a Democratic Labour Party where hardly any land was conveyed in the entire 10 years that they were there. And one of the things that I advocated for was to be able to say, look, let us make sure that we have no interruptions in this legacy of ours. People must have ownership of the land they occupy to use as a financial instrument, to use as equity, to be able to borrow against, to give themselves a chance in this Barbados. I talked about it in parliamentary group. I talked about it on the floor of Parliament many times. And as a result of that, as a result of our collective conversation, we saw that in the following estimates that there was money allocated to the Urban Development Commission to be able to begin the transfer, once again, of that tenantry land. There is more than one way to advocate for the people that you represent. When there are no big cameras around, when you don't have to put on a jacket and tie. And in fact, if you had knocked on our door, then to talk about these issues, sir, the difference is that we would have opened the door. We would have let you in. You went knocking on a door that the people barely wanted to open, and you had to wait to be let in. We would have let you in to talk. Monday afternoons, Monday evenings were always there. But do not blame the fact that you were not able to provide adequate representation on issues for the people of Christchurch South on this notion of having a voice. You always had a voice. In fact, it is an insult to the people who sit outside Parliament. It is an insult to the people who do not have the platform that you had for 5-6 years to suggest that you had no avenue to represent the people that voted for you. I reject it entirely, because I sat on a backbench for 2 years in circumstances where I had many avenues at my disposal and used them with results to be able to accomplish things for the people of St. Michael South Central. But I go further. And I know that the people who invited me here thought they were going to hear a little bit about the ministry, and it was time for that. But these are important things to say because I want us to understand that the legacy of the Barbados Labour Party, the tradition of the Barbados Labour Party is representation, is showing up, is talking to our people. That is what sets us apart from the other people. I hear all kinds of things now about how the process in the well of Parliament for estimates is problematic. That public officers should not be invited into the well because it is highly political. And you know, it makes me smile. Because notwithstanding the claim that it is too political, almost every utterance from the leader of the opposition over the last 2 weeks has been very politically polarizing. While the Barbados Labour Party government has come to talk about the business of the day, he claims he has a voice. Now, you would think that he would use that voice to similarly engage on those policies, but no. It is just a lot of political grandstanding in front of the same public officers that he seems to be so concerned about. And it doesn't make sense to me. In that same well of Parliament, I was able to raise the issue of the temporary workers at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I was speaking on behalf of people in my constituency who found that they were not able to plan their business and plan their lives on the basis of this temporary work. And I raised it. On that occasion, those people who, in St. Michael South Central, that I was representing and on whose behalf I was advocating, were subsequently to that estimate session appointed. But not only that, we heard in these estimates from the Director of Human Resources at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital the increased numbers, because it's not just for me that I taught these things. We heard the increased numbers of workers in QEH who had since been appointed. And you want to tell me that you cannot use the backbench of Parliament to represent the people that put you there? You should be shamed. So, you know, we are in the holy month of Ramadan. And I always say that it's not everything for which people advocate that will affect each of us. But I do, as the representative for St. Michael's South Central, where many of the people that I represent are of the Muslim faith, it is important as well to see the issues that affect different groups of people, because they're not all going to affect us all equally. And so one of the things that was represented to me was that we had difficulties with people getting access to visas to be able to travel to Saudi Arabia for the Hajj pilgrimage, which is a very important step that Muslims have to take. It's something that I raised in the same estimates process and raised again and again and again and again in parliamentary group. I used to show up, one thing about me. And subsequently, I don't recall how many months ago, the foreign minister was able to report that based on their discussions with our colleagues there in Saudi Arabia, that we were able to get Barbados included in the list of countries that could apply online so that Muslim Barbadians could more easily travel to Saudi Arabia for Hajj. Now, you may not feel compelled to applaud for that one, but I want to let you know that these things matter. These questions of faith and free expression of people's faith, it matters. And I didn't come here to pat myself on the back. In fact, you would not even know these things if the particular gentleman had not suggested to the people of Barbados that him putting on his big suit and crossing the floor and sitting at the head of Parliament on the front bench was the only way. No, I take exception to it. It is not the only way in our democratic process that one can raise dissent. But even so, look at the quality of the dissent. Look at the quality of the engagement. Where is the robust policy conversation? Where are the concerns of the people of Christchurch South? I do not hear them. I hear a lot of posturing. I hear a lot of anger, perhaps, at having been overlooked for a position that you thought should have been yours. The only advice I can give to the good gentleman is to set aside the ego and to remember who put you, not just the people that put you, but the color that you had on that got you in that honorable chamber. You know, there are some countries where if you cross the floor, you're going to go for a by-election. The people of Christchurch South will have to make their determination. But I say these things to you this evening to be able to reinforce in all of us that representation looks like a lot of different things. It does not always require high office. Leadership does not always require us to be at the top. Sometimes leadership is from behind. Sometimes leadership is conversation. Sometimes leadership is persuasion. Sometimes leadership is just bringing 3 or 4 to have a discussion and to help share ideas or thoughts on a particular policy of government. That is also leadership. And so I want you, Christchurch West, to be encouraged in Christchurch that your work to help galvanize this wider parish is particularly important now. And to be able to step in the breach for those members of the Labour Party in Christchurch South that feel, frankly, hard done by as a result of what they have just experienced. Now, tomorrow is budget. And there are a lot of very important questions that are at play. There are a lot of noises being made. You know, I had a conversation with the Minister in Finance a couple of days ago, Minister Strawn, and he said to me, there is no reality in which I will take counsel from the Democratic Labour Party about how to manage the country's debt. Because, I mean, the temerity of a group of people who caused us to have to enter a debt restructuring, to then come on the other side of the debt restructuring when we have all managed to survive, and in many cases to thrive, to come on the other side and say, oh, that debt restructuring put the NIS in peril. That debt restructuring put the central bank in peril. But they don't bother to remind you that the reason that the NIS took a hit because of debt restructuring was because they borrowed too much from the NIS. It is like you start a fire and then run outside and call fire, fire, fire. That is exactly what has happened here. And you know, I understand the feeling of Barbadians that we want to get on with things. I agree. We don't always want to keep rolling back in history and saying this happened 10 years ago and this happened 15 years ago. But we have to understand what brought us here, what precipitated these actions. The Minister of Finance, the Honorable Prime Minister, didn't get up one day and say, you know, I feel it restructuring the debt. In fact, it is the kind of operation that many countries have not been bold enough to undertake. And one of the reasons that it was so successful had to do with the people who did it. Do you think, you know, I remember a few years before the 2018 election, Chris Sinclair, as Minister of Finance, got up all hot and sweaty and talked about how he had found a way to reprofile the debt. We're talking about $1.9 billion, yeah? He found a way to, in arrears, he found a way to reprofile the debt, and it was going to save us $70 million. So we got $2 billion in arrears, billions more in actual outstanding loan repayments, and the most he could say that he could save us is $70 million. But I was like, I gotta go to the supermarket, and I tell you, boy, these things are coming about $500. And you said, this dollar will help. This dollar, that will help. But the truth is that they couldn't have done it because no one would have allowed a Barbados led by the then government to enter into a restructuring. They wouldn't have trusted us. They trusted us to do it properly and get it right because of who was leading the country. They trusted us to borrow to be able to execute important things because of who was leading and is leading the country. But then I hear all kinds of other noises. Oh, we have to focus on public investment. Do you know that, and Minister Duguid, I'm holding a bit of your portfolio here, but only temporarily. But do you know that while this Barbados Labour Party government has been in service to the people of Barbados, cumulatively over the last 5 years, 6 years, we were able to see 16% of GDP spent on public investments, capital expenditure that is important to be able to get the country going again. It's important to create jobs. It's important to create confidence. And when I talk about capital expenditure, I'm talking about roads. I'm talking about public buildings. I'm talking about works that are going to keep us safe, like the works going on in the Scotland district and the Gabions and so on. Even in COVID, our capex was the highest, far above anything that the Democratic Labour Party in previous years had ever achieved over 10 years. In fact, cumulatively over 6 years, our capital expenditure was greater than theirs over a 10-year period. And why is that important? And I'm saying these things because sometimes we hear people talk and make comparisons, and we don't realize that they're really holding up straw men and making false equivalencies. We saw in the central bank governor's report that he recommended that we increase our capital expenditure to be able to get the economy going again to 5%. But I also want us to be clear that in every year since we have been in service to the people of Barbados, we have gone higher in capital expenditure than the Democratic Labour Party in the previous 10 years. Because they're going to come and they're going to say these things and they're going to make it seem as if we're not doing enough. I also want it to be clear, and I'll say it again, that we found the debt at 178% of GDP, and in December it was down to 115% of GDP. I keep repeating these numbers because I want us to understand and to be able to hold up our chests and understand what the Barbados Labour Party has been able to achieve on behalf of the people of Barbados. But I always say, and I take the point, that it is not just the macro numbers that matter. You know, Minister Duguid will tell you that when he talks to the construction people, and when he talks to the tourism people, and when we talk to the bankers, they say, and sometimes we as Barbadians don't want to hear this, but they say, the economy is set for growth. But you know what my problem is? Skills, labor. It is something that we have to confront. We are in a situation where, because of the good work of your MP, following on from his friend's good work in investment, we are in a situation where we have the projects, but in many cases we don't have the labor. We don't have the project management skills. We don't have some of the other kinds of skills that we need. And that is why this Barbados Labour Party started a range of programs, Construction Gateway program to be able to get skills up. The National Transformation Initiative with thousands of courses available to people. But we have to be able to get that human capital investment, to get those skills in a position that we can take advantage of where the economy is going. It is difficult to talk about cost of living. Politicians don't often like to talk about it because it's a difficult thing to confront. It is difficult to have to say that there are things happening outside of Barbados that control the way we live, right? It's difficult to have to admit that, to have to say that the world is in an inflation crisis, right? Things are expensive. Notwithstanding that our inflation over the 2-year period is among the lowest in the Caribbean and now among the lowest in the world, still, we have to listen and we have to pay attention when Barbadians say we are finding it difficult to afford things. And we did listen. That was the reason for the compact that the social partnership entered. That was the reason for the cap on VAT for a particular basket of goods. That was the reason for the removal of VAT with respect to electricity bills. That was the reason for the 2 wage increases that this Barbados Labour Party government was able to achieve. But I have perhaps an unpopular perspective on this, which is that cost of living is not inflation alone. Cost of living is inflation relative to income, is a measure of affordability. And the truth is that there's some things that we need to do in a real way to allow people to address this. When we wrote the first BERT, Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Plan, in 2018, one of the things that we targeted was that we knew we would eventually have to come to a place where people were making more money because of the kinds of jobs. Not, and I want you to hear me, not just by paying more for existing jobs. Not just by paying more for existing jobs, but by moving the economy to a high-skilled economy where people were able to get jobs that pay at a higher level. That is the challenge for us now. To be able to move to a high-wage economy, one. And that's why you see the courses, like the cybersecurity courses that are being offered. And I'll come to that in a few minutes that I have left in a second. But that is why we are trying to pivot this economy towards a new industrial policy that is driven in large part by technology, so that people can acquire and practice the skills that are going to earn them more in markets in Barbados and outside. But the other thing we have to do, and it is not a fanciful idea, it is not a dream, it is not just something that you read in the newspaper. We have to be able to finally transition this economy to one that is based on fossil fuels, from one that is based on fossil fuels to one that is based on clean, renewable energy. And I know that in the coming days, we will hear some more of that, but that is part of the transformation. Part of the transformation is that green transition to renewable energy. That is what is going to make all of our overheads in small business affordable. You will find that the biggest expense for businesses, big and small, has to do with fuel. If once we effect that transition and make it affordable, and make energy affordable, that is how we are going to be able to afford to run our businesses and run our households in this country. But the education transformation is a part of that as well. To be able to educate our young people away from, or not just around, those traditional jobs. Or not just around jobs at all, but around business. And being able to have the confidence and the innovation to create new products and find new markets in Barbados and elsewhere. And so this is where the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology comes in. You thought it wasn't getting there now, but getting there. Because what a newly rebuilt fit-for-purpose MIST will have to do, and the problem that we'll have to solve, is how do we create a new industrial policy that is driven by technology? I don't mind telling you that one of the things that we as a government have been doing for many years is buying technology, being consumers of tech. And we have to find a way now to get together with the companies in our space, local businesses that are software developers, that are engineers, that are coders, that are working, that have telecoms companies that are working in this area, to generate products. Generate products that solve our problems, but then that scale up to solve the world's problems. So that instead of just becoming consumers of technology and saying, yes, you have an off-the-shelf solution, we want to buy that and we want to put it in our ministry, we can put it in immigration and we can put it in the police. No. The way to drive a technological industrial transformation is to create the technology for the problems. And there are companies here that are doing it. The other way to do that is to use data as a commodity. We generate a lot of data in this country. There's a lot of information out there. We have to be able to use it properly, and that's why we came with the Data Protection Act of 2019, to protect that data. But alongside protecting it, we also have to be able to use it for people to create knowledge products, to do research and development, to be able to understand how is it that the aloe vera plant can be turned into something that is therapeutic for the world to use. We have to get beyond the point of just going in the yard and breaking off a piece of aloes and swallowing it or putting it in our hair. The reason that we do that, and that came down through generations, is that it works, right? But are we going to allow somebody else to come here and take all of that knowledge from all of us and to uproot all the aloe plants that are indigenous to this country and to go away and make millions of dollars? Or are we going to do it ourselves? It is through Export Barbados, what we would used to call Barbados Investment in Industrial Development Corporation, and the research and development that they're doing there. It is through the data centers, the data center that we will develop as part of MIST. It is through engaging startups that are involved in technology locally to find out what they're doing and how we can use it to solve our problems and the world's problems. That is how we create these high-income jobs. You know, I want to finish by telling you about the public sector modernization program that we have at MIST. And it may not sound like a success story when I tell you, but it will be. The government began the process in 2019 of digitizing records. And that's been going for some time. What we decided to do with those young people, mostly young people, who've been doing that work, one of the things we realized is that we need to change the technology, because the technology that we were using did not give us the best use of the data. It meant that we could mainly just look at it, but we couldn't manipulate it. And we decided, look, we have to stop, and we have to reset, and we have to change the technology that we're using. But here's the thing. I met with these individuals, and I say young people because that naturally rolls off the tongue, but actually, there are a lot of people getting involved in technology who are over the age of 50, who are transitioning to a new career, and who are finding that it is a career that they're able to transition to. And so some of our officers in the Digitization Center are actually those people above the age of 50 finding something new to do, getting involved in tech. There's a reason that we have 98% uptake of the national ID in the population 50 and over, and 90% in the overall population. This notion that older people can't change their ways is a fallacy. It is the young people that sometimes have the issue. And older people are ready for the transformation. But these people that have been working in the Digitization Center, we realized we had to pause. The project, as it currently sits, comes to an end at the end of this month. But these folks have gotten so much practice, so many skills, have been able to develop as tech professionals from the work that they've been doing over the last 4 years. And the plan that we have now is to use them as our platform to be able to build out within MIST a set of experts in technology that have come organically from this project. It is not a case where we say this was temporary, the project is over, thanks and good night. What we are doing now is a career development program with them. Each of them is signing up for courses in the National Transformation Initiative, Coursera, all of the tech courses that are available. I encourage you, if you haven't yet gone, to go and have a look. And they are building on the skills that they earn in the program, and what we have committed to do, we've assigned a career development professional, and we are working with someone in NTI to be able to make sure that we hold on to these folks. These folks and others are going to be the beginning of that industrial policy revolution in technology. The programs that we create that are temporary have the wherewithal to allow people to scale up their income, scale up their knowledge, and to do better in their lives. The same thing is true of the youngsters who have started companies coming out of the NCC 360 program. I have some in my constituency. So that they spend some of their time on that program, weeding the road and cutting grass, but you know what else? They can go at any time of the day to do that. The other hours of the day, they're going to other areas, right? They're taking more work. They're developing their skills. They're hiring each other in communities and broadening their horizons and doing more. And so we as government have challenged ourselves to not just see these kinds of programs as a way to give somebody some money in their pocket. We have to move beyond that. Certainly in MIST, we have used the digitization program as a way to identify people who are interested in tech. I asked the question in the room on the day that I met with them. Because we all know that sometimes people take a job. Sometimes people take a job, they say, all right, well, I ain't doing nothing, so I can do this job. So I wanted to see what was the interest and the involvement. It said a lot to me that every single one of them was on time to have this conversation. It said a lot to me, right? In the room, engaged, ready to talk about the next steps. So I said, how many people in this room has a real interest in technology as a career? And everybody's hand went up. And during the morning session and talking to them, and some of them have reached out after, I realized that this program of government, while in this iteration it ends at the end of this month, it is the beginning for them. And I have taken the opportunity, and I'm working with the officers to make sure that we don't lose any of them, that we use them as a testing ground, as a platform, as a way to build out skills for a new industrial policy and technology for this country, because this is the way that we are going to really organically grow income, move people towards higher wages, and help people to become successful. Barbados, our party family, I want us, as we prepare for the budget tomorrow, to know that Barbados is in a transformation. And this is the time for us to be bolder than we have ever been. This is the time for us to be able to hold up our chests. And it's not every time that everything will be going perfectly. But when you are operating on principle and with a good heart and good intentions and good governance, which has always been the Labour Party way, you can bank on success. It doesn't mean that everything that you do or try, you will hit out of the park or of the oval right away. But that we stay focused on the task ahead that we have to deliver. So Labour Party family, I want to thank you for your hospitality this evening. And I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow as the Prime Minister gets ready to deliver her budget. Thank you.